Oh, you got a pole? Yeah, I could do this.
Dancing.
Trees in the hurricane. Oh, a light. Look at you. Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of Old School, New School NFL Football Talk, the show where we are more concerned with our lighting than actually knowing anything about football. I am the old school part of this equation. My name is Wil Masisak. You might know me as Accidental Zen on Twitter or from over there at SteelerFury.com and all that Pittsburgh Steelers stuff. Also with me is Jude Allume. He's the new school part. How are you, Jude?
Something like that. I'm all right.
What are you on Twitter? You are like the Jude Allume. What's going on?
Mr. Allume.
Mr. Allume.
Yeah.
There you go. On Twitter, so people can want to find all the exciting takes that you have about life in the world. And speaking of takes about life in the world, what's going on in the NFL world for you this week? What are you hearing and want to talk about?
Lots and lots of quarterback talk. I mean, of course, everyone's heard all the news about the two big-name quarterbacks, I guess two top-tier quarterbacks who could possibly be on the move. There's been talks about Russell Wilson possibly moving, and upon the first time hearing it, I know I was like, it's not happening, because it's Russell Wilson. This is a guy who's won a Super Bowl, played in another. Every year the Seahawks are in the playoffs. Why would they want to move on from him? But apparently there's more to the story than meets the eye, and it's a very likely possibility that he can actually be moving before, the season begins. And he's already given them a list of places that he would want to go if it were to happen. And for me, it's just like, here you have a guy who lays it out on the line, and he's brought your team to the playoffs just about every year he's been in the league. And we're talking about trading him, and it's just a little bit like what today's NFL is. Kind of like what I said either last week or 2 weeks ago, just it doesn't matter who the player is. Anyone is movable at this point in time in the NFL.
Oh, yeah, although, I mean, these teams, if they're seriously considering letting quarterbacks who have proven track records in the postseason and are still young enough to have, 7-8 good years left, that's just I just don't understand the hubris of an organization like that to think they could rebuild. We could find another quarterback. Like, you just don't find those guys. They don't grow on trees. And even if you don't get along with them, it's probably better to just do things to make them happy, even if it's not exactly what you want to do. It's a little like marriage, it's a marriage in a way that right. you can't just expect that you're going to have everything your way and that it's going to be, peaches and cream for you the rest of the time. So that's all I'll say about that. I get that they're unhappy, and I get why each side might want to dig in a little bit into the sand on it, but I don't know. What I really think about are teams that have never had a quarterback like that, who are out there going like, we'll take him, we'll give up whatever. Like Chicago, imagine being a Chicago Bears fan where last year, maybe Tom Brady will come here. And then it was like, maybe this guy, or maybe now this year they're like, maybe it's Russell Wilson, maybe it's Deshaun Watson. And now they're going to end up with like Ryan Fitzpatrick, maybe. Like that would be like the best case scenario for them. So I just feel like it's a situation where if you got a quarterback like that, it's ridiculous. No matter what teams offer you for it, it's basically not worth it unless you just literally if they're at the end of their career, and by the time they're going to be back, your team is going to be good enough again that they're going to be gone.
I mean, for some teams, it does make sense. I mean, maybe not Russell Wilson, and we'll get more into it, but say like a Deshaun Watson case, it does make sense because he's already said, I'm not going to play another snap for you. But I agree with you. Like, you don't come across a Russell Wilson every year in the draft. You don't come across a guy who has this level of production for this long. The one thing I would say is, he doesn't make sense in for every team, it wouldn't make sense to trade for Russell Wilson.
No, but I meant giving him up. That's the part that's more inexplicable to me. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, because I mean, he is 32. Everybody is not going to be like Brady. You're not going to get to, age 43 and you're still playing. But for Russell Wilson, just like you said, the Bears is one of those places he said he wouldn't, decline a trade to. He would want to go play for. And if you're the Bears, you're happy to hear that because you feel like, hey, I've got this great defense and I've just been letting it go to waste in this quarterback purgatory that I've been stuck in for so long. So if you can get Russell Wilson, who's apparently, a trade option now. If I'm the Bears, I'm absolutely going out and getting him. But like I alluded to before, we also have, Deshaun Watson. This is a guy who plain out said, I'm not playing for you. Only gave the new head coach, a meeting as more of a formality and show of respect than anything. But he already has it in his mind. I'm not playing for this organization ever again. This is crazy to me because it's like, how do you get to this point so quickly? I mean, I get it. Everything that's happened with him not being included in off-season decision-making and head coach decisions and things like that. But it's like you would have thought like he played all of last season just disgruntled or something, the way he's so adamant that is over for him.
How did it escalate this quickly? Apparently you've never been married. That's all I have to say. Hey, the other thing that I noted was that Aaron Jones, the running back from Green Bay, who I might add recently had a crucial fumble that probably cost Green Bay quite a bit in that game in the playoffs. That Green Bay is now talking about franchise tagging him. Now, first of all, franchise tagging a running back, I don't know, the number isn't super high, but it just feels like there's so many running backs out there that want to play. There's got to be somebody that wants to play for you that's not going to cost $1 million. I love Aaron Jones. I loved him coming out before he was even with the Green Bay Packers, and I would take him on my team. I just don't know. Using the franchise tag, I just feel like it's such a short-sighted strategy.
Gotcha. I don't know. I mean, like I get what you say. You don't want to pay running backs at a premium because we've had a string of running backs getting paid and, kind of just falling off the map. Look at Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, I guess he still went over 1,000, but every year since he's been in the league, declining numbers. Derrick Henry might be the only guy that I can think of who got a big payday and he's still, producing. But who's the guy? David Johnson with the Texans got a big payday. Nothing happened. Mark Ingram got a couple paydays and, he's kind of just been declining.
Oh, so, then there's this guy, Le'Veon Bell. You might have heard of him.
Le'Veon Bell finally held out. Got the contract he wanted, even though it was about average. And I think the Steelers made a similar offer to him.
He lost the money he'll never recoup the money for the year that he sat out. Basically,
gotcha.
It was the same money except for he lost a year.
So that happened, and eventually it doesn't work out for him too. So the only thing it's saying to every other NFL team is that, once you pay the guy, they just don't perform the same, except Derrick Henry. So I get it why some teams would be hesitant to give that big monster contract out, and they'd rather take let's see what you can do for another year approach, like pay you to play type approach, instead of we'll give you all this money and, whatever happens, happens. Todd Gurley, another example, and that one just kind of frustrates me because he was legit the best running back in the NFL, and then it's just like, you no longer have any skill.
It's just running backs. Like, they just decline quickly, and it's a shame they get used up. There's only like your Frank Gores. I mean, there's like so few running backs who can sustain that career for longer than a 2 or 3 or 4 year peak. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
These aren't guys who are like, old and, on their 7th and 8th year. These are guys still in their first 5 years in the league.
Understood.
Like what's going on. But the thing I wanted to say is that I disagree. You can't just plug and play running backs. I mean, Aaron Jones is definitely in that kind of elite level of running back.
Oh, 3 downs. I mean, that's the difference with him, is that he can give you something in all 3 downs and he's pretty good at it.
So perfectly with what the Packers are doing, which is why I would say they are going to franchise tag him, because you don't want to lose a talent like that. This is a guy who fits your offense very well, complements your opposing pieces, and they always have this lack of receivers in Green Bay, and he's kind of like a slot guy, kind of sort of for Aaron Rodgers, sort of like a safety valve. So he's really important, and I get why they would spend that big money, but again, only for the 1 year.
But this brings us back around to the earlier conversation about how do things go south with quarterbacks. You let players on the offensive side get away. You don't draft first-round wide receivers. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I think maybe the whole idea of franchising Aaron Jones and trying to keep him that way is to try to keep their quarterback happy for another year. I mean, to me, that's a bigger motivation than anything that's replaceable or not about Aaron Jones. Right. So like I said, respect him. Think he's a really good player. But I'm just not sure, I would do that. But if it makes your quarterback happy and that's, keeps the peace for another year, so the next quarterback to say he wants to trade is an Aaron Rodgers, then, could be.
Hey, listen, you didn't get him a receiver last year with all of those receivers that were in the draft. The least you can do is keep Aaron Jones. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, it's like not getting a first rounder, like that is fine. Like even taking a quarterback there, I don't get it, but there were so many wide receivers later, just like every round he wasn't the guy you could pick. Like it's silly in a wide receiver draft that deep. And this year, also deep wide receiver draft is like what they're going to do this year will be interesting to say the least.
Seeing a lot of mocks with the Packers taking a receiver finally, but you know more than anybody. Mocks mean nothing until the actual draft rolls around. Because I don't think I saw any mocks with them taking Jordan Love last year, but that's what ended up happening.
Yep. Well, it's just like there's certain franchises that just think differently than everybody else, and they're just not. You just can't predict their behavior as easily, right? And I would say, the Packers are definitely one of those.
Maybe they're hoping, for similar result.
I guess.
Love, let him sit behind Rodgers, and then Rodgers become the heir apparent.
Yeah, although that's such a rarity. It's like the fact that they did it maybe makes people like the entrepreneurs who created some business that turned out to be super successful. They think they have the secret and that they can do it with anything. It's like I know I made this business successful. Whatever I do in the future, I'm going to be equally successful because I know how to do it. And of course, they often fail at all those other things. And I feel like if you picked a quarterback to sit behind a great other quarterback for a few years, and then he turned into be a great one, then you think you're going to have that magic touch and you're going to do it every time. So, I'm sure you couldn't convince those guys that they don't know what they're doing.
Great quarterback to learn from, So
no, that's good. Except
doesn't hurt to try. Doesn't hurt to try.
If the other quarterback's willing to teach you, because that's the thing. Brett Favre didn't teach Aaron Rodgers anything. He wouldn't even talk to him.
I could see Rodgers not willing to teach Love, but
he doesn't seem like the type to really take a guy under his wing and say, "Okay, this is the kid. I'm going to show you the ropes."
Hopefully, I'm wrong about that. But.
Yeah, indeed. Well, speaking of drafts and mocks, today we're going to switch to our kind of draft focus. Move on to a couple of other position groups. Would you want to do defensive line first or offensive line first? What do you like?
Or whatever floats your boat.
Okay, well, as Joel Buxbaum would say, if in doubt about which player to choose in the draft, choose the bigger one, which I feel like is actually pretty good advice. So let's go with offensive line. I think offensive linemen are typically bigger, right?
Right.
So I don't know if you wanted to lump them all together with tackles and centers and guards, but let's just start with who do you think is the best offensive line prospect in this draft, and let's work from there.
So, my take as far as, the craziness that's going on in these days with the COVID and how it's affecting everything from last season up to the draft now. And, I tend to, knock them down a notch if they choose to sit out the season. But this goes against that with who I think is the best lineman in this offensive lineman in this year's draft, and that's Penei Sewell. Hopefully I said that right. But just the consensus top offensive lineman across the board. I've had the pleasure over the last couple of days of just reading tons of material on, who's the best, tons of mocks, who's going where, and just consistently within that top five. As far as the top three, I've seen Penei's name up there, even though he didn't play last season, but what he's done at Oregon kind of, gives him a little bit of leeway. So you can kind of just look forward that just a big guy, which is exactly what you want out of your lineman, 6'5", 312 pounds, highly decorated career. He opted out of the season. And, I really do hope
you really don't want to like him, but you do.
But I can't help it. I even when as far as going on YouTube, looking at some highlights, and the guy's just huge and he moves well. He was a day one starter as a true freshman. Not everybody can do that. And then just as far as metrics, he was graded as the best run blocker in all of college football.
Well, he's like a house on wheels. I mean, that's, he's the size of a house, but the mobility of, something much smaller. And you just don't find, it's like a Planet Theory sort of a guy. There's just not that many people roaming the planet who are that size and have that kind of feet and kind of be the proverbial dancing bear.
And he's also just powerful. I mean, I'm watching him just block one guy into a second guy and just tossing them both with disregard. And it's like he finishes the block. When I say finish, I mean like he's not just going to block you and leave it alone. He's going to drive you until the whistle. And if we're being honest, even until after the whistle sometimes.
Right. Yeah, which is a thing that you like to have in offensive linemen. I think, the way I break down the value of offensive linemen, if I'm trying to rank them, I think there are three skill sets that are the priorities. So the first is obviously if you can play left tackle and you can do it all, but I mean, if you can play left tackle and start immediately when you get into the NFL, you're at some kind of level. The next skill set would be position flexibility, and not just you can play a couple of positions, but you can be great at multiple positions. And then the third would be if you're an interior lineman who can move, who has lateral skills, that's really useful, especially in the modern NFL, all these spread offenses with the RPOs and everything else. Having offensive linemen that can move opens the world, to what you can do on offense. So if Penei Sewell is the first guy, Rashawn Slater from Northwestern has to be the second guy because he is almost as good a left tackle, despite being significantly smaller and not as long in terms of his arm length or whatever. But I think you could plug him in at any position on the offensive line, and he would be an upgrade to your team. He's that kind of talent. I actually think the value for him might be as a center because I think he's typically centers are super smart and they have the athletic ability to get to the second level and can, if they need to, stand in place and they hold against a big nose tackle, they can do it. If they have to fight Aaron Donald with quickness, they can do it. It's like a very complex job in the NFL. So to me, Rashawn Slater, I think he can play out at the tackle if he has to, or if you need him. But I think he's going to be a fantastic interior lineman day one. He's my number 2 guy. Sure. How about you?
Day one guy after Sewell?
Yeah.
Got you. Who would you have as like your underrated or sleeper lineman in this draft?
Well, yeah, because there's some other great ones that are going to go in the first round. I mean, there's Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech. There's Elijah Vera Tucker from SC, who I think is going to be a fantastic guard. So those guys are sort of more obvious. I think the guy that really, people are not talking about enough. I'll give you one a tackle and one inside. The tackle is this guy, Drew Himmelman from Illinois State, who's actually playing in the spring season, even though he's declared for the draft, which is a thing that we may never see happen again in college football. But he is a 6'9", about 350, 320 pound former tight end. So he has that sort of tight end mobility, has been on some quality FCS teams like championship or runner-up teams. And if you saw James Robinson, the running back who went to Jacksonville last year, if you go look at James Robinson highlights, you see this guy playing left tackle who is another guy that's like a big dancing bear type, very nasty with the run blocking, good pass protector. So I like him. Robert Hainsey of Notre Dame as an interior lineman, I think is ridiculously overlooked in this draft. Most people have him as like a 4th or 5th rounder. I think he might be more like a 2nd or 3rd rounder because of his mobility. He is one of the few guys in the interior in this class who actually can play in any style offense. How about you?
I like one of the things about me too when I'm evaluating any players is I take into consideration the level of talent that you're playing against. So obviously, sure, I'm gonna tend to skew and favor the guys who play in the SEC because for a long time now it's been the best division in college football. As a result, I'm going to go with Alex Leatherwood. Right now, he's kind of mocking in the 2nd round, and I feel like he might have the talent to be a 1st-round draft pick. This is a guy prior to the start of the 2020 season. A lot of people were saying this is the 2nd best left tackle in the 2021 draft. I'm not sure exactly what happened that has him, going so much lower now.
He went to Mobile and had a disastrous week at the Senior Bowl. But
I mean, you can't can you really place that much emphasis on 1 week as opposed to what he put together over the course of the season, where he went All-America in this past 2020 season? And I mean, this is a guy who, it's not just one season where he's done well. He's been playing in Alabama since 2018 when he first started, but he started at guard. So that even kind of adds to his resume because it shows you he has the ability to play tackle. He has the ability to play guard. So he's very versatile in that regard. And again, 2020 had a great year, All-American. The one thing I've seen is that sometimes he struggles with pass rushers, but this is a big guy at another 6'5", 300-plus lineman with good feet, good power. And I feel like you can't let 1 week, granted it was a week, where a lot of people were watching, but you can't let 1 week distract you from the career resume he's had in 3 years at Alabama.
Well, here's what I'll say two things. I have two theories about what happened to not just Alex Leatherwood at Immobile, but also Deontay Brown, his guard teammate from Alabama. The first theory is they just came off of playing the championship game, and it's got to be a little bit of a letdown to then go to Mobile and have to crank it up again and suddenly be doing all these drills that don't really favor you as the offensive lineman. And like, okay, I get that part of it. I also think that there's another theory that's not as attractive, and that is that line was, offensive lines are all about how they play together. Mm-hmm. And those guys, I think, benefited from the coaching and their ability to play together so all the guys in the line have talent at Alabama this year, and they were, collectively the best offensive line in college football. Mm-hmm. But I think maybe when getting into the one-on-ones, they were exposed a little bit for what their flaws are like. Even when Alex Leatherwood played guard, he gave up 22 pressures in one season playing guard, which is, it's just sort of indicative that he has some issues with quickness or speed. And so, okay, they're all flawed. All these college prospects have got to get better and so on and so forth. But yeah, I'd almost say that second theory holds a little bit of water for me, because I do think Alex Leatherwood, maybe if he goes to a team where he's the last piece, all the other guys are really good, I feel like he could help you. If you're hoping to rebuild your line around a guy, I'm not sure I would take that risk with him.
Got you. What about a guy that you think is overrated?
Well, see, you stole my thunder, because I was going to say Alex Leatherwood. I'd say maybe I don't think he's a bad player, but I think Jalen Mayfield from Michigan being talked about as a top tackle prospect. I feel like he was he played right tackle. He's probably a guard at the next level, but he's got a lot of work to do, I think, to be a professional offensive lineman. Yes, there's a lot to work with there, but people are pumping him up to be a first-round draft pick, a top 20 pick. I've seen him a couple times. I'm not sure I see that with him. How about you?
I'm going to go with Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. A lot of people have him as the highest right tackle in the draft. He's being mocked in the first round right now, but I see him as more of a developmental player, someone who can come in here and there, spell whoever is starting, and maybe after 2 or 3 seasons of learning and improving his footwork, improving his power, his speed, then maybe he can be an NFL level starter. But as a first round pick, those are usually guys I feel like you're going to plug and play right away, and he just doesn't fit there for me. Does a lot of things good. I'm not sure what he does great. This last season, up to before he opted out of last season in November. Again, I don't really like
the middle of the season. Yeah, that's rough.
Especially in the middle of the season. Some people will say, it was because of injury. He had something with his back. I'm not sure how much I can, look past that. But, whatever it is whatever it is. But I'll cut him some slack for it, whatever. And he's just not a natural athlete. He doesn't have the naturally good feet to, go out there and make those blocks in space.
Arm length is an issue for him, I think. That just shows up on the film.
There for him, and whenever you're a lineman and you don't have that long wingspan, it leads to you reaching for blocks, and you never want to be a lineman that's reaching for blocks, because that's exactly what the defender wants you to do. Now your center of gravity is kind of thrown off, and it's just easier for you to get past that lineman that's reaching to block you, and you see that a lot with Jenkins. So I don't see him as a first-round pick, which is where he's kind of being mocked right now. I see him as a guy you take maybe in the second, third round and kind of develop him over time.
Yeah, and he might work as a guard in the NFL because even with a lack of length, I think he's nasty and he has that disposition that sort of, says guard to me. Mm-hmm. Speaking of nasty dispositions and athletes, let's move over quickly on the defensive side and talk about some defensive interior linemen in this draft. Christian Barmore is a really interesting character because he kind of he really played the best of his career the last 2 games of his career. Not that he wasn't bad, that he was bad before that, but what do you make of a guy who's like this much of a, he's just thrown into the scene recently?
You could look at it like that, but just like you said, it's not like he didn't do anything before those last 2 games. If anything, I would take it on the other side of the coin. I would say big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games, and he chose the 2 biggest games of his career to show up and show out. That's the college football playoffs. In the national championship, he wins defensive MVP of the game. I mean, that's not something that you can hold against somebody on the biggest stage. They perform their best, but his numbers aren't going to necessarily pop out at you, but this is another big boy on the defensive line. He's powerful. He's big. That's not a skill or attribute, but you just got to say it because he's so big, 6'5", 311 pounds. I say it because he's that big and his feet are just so great. He moves well, has a lot of explosion off the ball. He's going to get off the ball and absolutely wreak havoc into backfields because like within that first and second step, he's already there. This is a great defender. He's definitely going to go in the first round, I would say. There aren't a lot of great D tackles, so I don't know if it's going to be strictly because of his, talent and ability or because of the lack of talent and ability, but I think this is definitely a guy that you're going to see get taken in that first round.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And I would say this, if you are in love with any of the center prospects in this class, don't watch them play against Alabama because this guy, I can think off the top of my head that Josh Myers from Ohio State and Creed Humphrey, I think, was the other one that he played against and just absolutely ruined their day. So I think that's a guy. If you want a guy in the middle who can create some havoc, he's a great guy. I want to talk about Davion Nixon from Iowa. He may not be like the steadiest performer, but he's a guy that when you watch him, the peak plays, like you see, this is what he is capable of doing. Are at the very, very top. He reminds me of Javon Hargrave, who's with the Eagles right now. He used to be a Steeler. In that, he's this guy that has the quickness in the middle at a big size, who can penetrate, who can get to the passer, who can wreck screens and plays on the outside. If you're trying to run to the outside away from a defensive tackle, he just to shoot that gap and get you. So for a guy that is sort of more of a gap shooter, one gap style player, I like his game a lot. He had a game where he picked off a pass, like a screen pass, and took it to the house like 60 yards, running like O.J. Simpson. So the guy is like obviously a big athletic dude who can make some plays for it.
Gotcha. And what about your underrated sleeper pick at D tackle?
I like Naquan Jones from Michigan State. Played in the Hula Bowl, so that puts him. Usually that means you're like a guy. Maybe this would have been East-West Shrine game. You're on the day 3 conversation. But he's a guy that I think it's a little bit hard sometimes to, defensive linemen who aren't big pass or quarterback sackers, but who are really solid players. They're good against the run. They get penetration. They create double teams, require double team. And I think he's one of those guys. He has a lot of power and explosion in that first step. And at the Hula Bowl, he had a nice sack too. So he can give you some pass rush, but for the value buy of getting a guy like that on day 3, I kind of like that a lot. A little bit, people would characterize him as maybe not a lot of production in college, but you watch the games, I feel like he stands out.
Gotcha. I like Mustafa Johnson out of Colorado.
Yep.
This is the knock on him is going to be, a couple things. He burst out onto the scene in 2018, had a great season, got all Pac-12 honors. And then 2019 had an ankle injury. So boom, a couple people forget about him there. 2019, Colorado only played 6 games. Again, some people might not be paying attention to that short to that small sample size of games. And now a guy that so many people were excited about coming out of 2018, a lot of people are kind of forgetting about. The real knock on him, though, is, a lot of people are saying he's undersized. He's listed as 6'2". That might be a little bit questionable, but he's also around 290 pounds, which you don't really want your interior defensive lineman to be under 300 pounds, especially when they're going up against guys who are 320 and 330. And
excuse me, isn't the best player in the National Football League under 300 pounds playing defensive tackle? I'm just asking.
That was going to be my next point. A player that his former head coach, Mel Tucker, has compared him to is the best defensive player in the NFL, multiple Defensive Player of the Year award, Aaron Donald. You would think that as good as Aaron Donald has been, maybe that's something people would consider a little bit less as far as, the size of your interior defensive lineman, because they do measure up favorably to each other as far as their size and weight. And look what Donald is able to do. And a lot of people are saying that this guy is cut from a similar cloth and that he has that relentless motor. You hear that a lot when people are talking about defensive linemen, where they have a motor that just won't quit. Snap of the ball, doesn't matter if he gets beat, he's going to keep working until he finds his way back to the ball and he can possibly make a play. So much explosion, so much good feet. He's a natural athlete. He played tight end and he played DN and linebacker in high school, and it's kind of translated. Even at Colorado, they moved him all around that defensive line as well. This is a guy, given the opportunity, I think somebody will find great value for him. His peak right now is looking like, third round in most mocks that I've seen, but he's going much later in other mocks I've seen as well. So somebody might get a hell of a steal if they take the chance on this guy, or if they don't even need to take the chance, they can just kind of wait, let him fall to you in the third and fourth rounds, and he'll pay off huge dividends as a result.
Yeah, it's going to be a really weird year with no combine and limited access to pro days and medicals and everything, because he's just like players who are perceived as being safer, I think, are going to get a lot more play, unfortunately. They did last year. I think it happened again this year. What about overrated for you?
I'm going to go with Marvin Wilson out of Florida State. This is one of those situations where if you're an NFL GM, the big boy may actually impress you with that size and speed, but it'll be a detriment. This guy's huge, 6'3", 320 pounds. And, you just certain things just kind of help you kind of boost your draft stock. So he comes from a great program in Florida State, and the 2 years of films we have on him from 2018 and 2019, he did great things. Well, not great things. He did good things that'll make you think that 2020 was going to be great, but 2020 was not a great season for him. He would have been better off coming out last year in 2019, where a lot of people had him going in the second round. Some people even had him going in the first. If anything, he's hurt his draft stock. He only played in, I believe, 6 games this season, but even in those 6 games, he didn't do much of anything to help anyone say, you know what, this is a guy we need to go out and take. Usually you see a guy come back for a senior year, it gives you a little boost or whatever, because guys just like to see the commitment to the team, but it hurt him in this one. He's huge, but he's just so stiff. I've read a lot about him, and just about everyone said the same thing. He's stiff, doesn't have good feet. He struggles breaking off of blocks. He's more a guy who's going to be a run defender, but he's not going to give you much of anything as far as pass rushing, So this is a guy that you're going to draft and already have it in your head that, he only plays the run and he doesn't play the pass. So that instantly makes him a rotational player. And for him to be going in some mocks as early as second round, third round, to me, I don't like. There are more D tackles. If you're choosing to go a developmental route, there are other D tackles that just have more upside potential than him.
Yeah, pick a big guy with a motor over a big guy who had the reputation, right? That takes us into our last word. I'm going to start because it feeds off of this. The first is, it's sort of a 1A, 1B last word. 1A is people have and talk about official, like people with NFL teams, real scouts. They have a hard time letting go of a guy who was a super high recruit like Marvin Wilson, right? They just can't let go of the fact that guy was 4-star or 5-star coming out. There's talent there. There must be something. We could unlock it, So I think that's very hard to let go of. The second thing is players who play on teams that are not good teams, even if they're great players, they tend to get downgraded. It's like, well, he wasn't good enough to make that team better than they were, so he must not be that great. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's how you end up with guys who either don't get drafted or end up in the later rounds who suddenly come out of nowhere and can play. I think of Robertson, the pass rusher with the Bears, and his teammate, the guy from UTEP, Aaron Jones, that we were talking about earlier, that they played on this horrible UTEP team that nobody wanted to, take anybody from there. And you wonder how those guys end up 6th-round picks or undrafted. That's why. Last word for you.
We'll stick with the defensive linemen, and we'll give the news. It's not much of news now, but J.J. Watt officially signed with the Arizona Cardinals. I like the potential of what it could be when you pair him with Chandler Jones and how he's been one of the more unspoken of sack kings of the last 10 years or so. That could be a scary combo right there that could propel that Arizona defense up another level, up another notch. And who knows, maybe this is what they need to make them a playoff team after such a long hiatus.
Yeah, except for that they're talking about getting rid of Chandler Jones so they can afford to pay J.J. Watt.
No way.
So they said, I'll believe it when I see it. I love Chandler Jones. He down year last year, but he's been a terrific unsung. Like he said, nobody really mentions him with the top pass rushers, but he's been great. Jude, we're all out of time. But it's been a massive show. Next week, we will talk about some more draft prospects and whatever the hell else is going on in the NFL world. But in the meantime, he's the Mr. Allume on Twitter, Jude Allume. I am Wil Masisak, also known as Accidental Zen on Twitter. And we're OSNSFB on Twitter, Old School, New School. Check it out. Subscribe below or hit the like button. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on Old School, New School Football. Professional show business.
Yeah.